please consider donating to the Segundo Brass Ensemble and South Bay Music and supporting their mission if you can. The Hermosa Beach Museum is very happy to welcome you all. Since 2007, we've had this awesome space and have been devoted to engaging, delighting, and educating through the exploration of history. As a private nonprofit organization, we provide historical programming like this and keep this space open to community events along these lines solely through donations. So if you can, please consider supporting us tonight. And if you're able, please consider becoming an annual donor as well. That'll help not only with programming like this, but with supporting all the collections that you see around you and in our archives. So it's very much appreciated and helps keep us alive as an organization. Tonight, we are here for the music of the Biltmore, which we'll get to in a second, but some previews of upcoming events. On October 9th, that's a Thursday evening from 6 to 8 p.m., we will be having a presentation on the Gabrielino Tonga past and present with Kimberly Morales-Johnson, who we're very happy to have. Kimberly is the tribal secretary for the Gabrielino Tonga St. Gabriel Band of Mission Indians and community elected commissioner for the Los Angeles City and County Native American Indian Commission. So she'll be here to speak on the indigenous past and present of Los Angeles County, hitting on the history, culture, and traditions there. So if you can join us for that, please consider it. That one is another free event because we do hold that education to be of the utmost importance to our mission and to the community. So we'd love to see you there for that. The other upcoming event on our calendar is a family workshop anatomy of a skateboard. So if you have young ones around, that will be a $10 admission per participant, but of course free for guardians to join. And that'll be on October 4th at 11 a.m. That's a Saturday morning. So if you can join us for that, we'd love to have you. Apart from that, very happy to introduce Mark Shoemaker, who will be presenting on the music of the Biltmore Hotel.
Thank you all for coming, and thank you also Segundo Brass Ensemble for my hometown of El Segundo. And before I started, I wanted to just get a quick survey here of how many people actually ever saw the Biltmore standing. So not many. It was demolished in 1969, so now this will age you a little bit, but how many ever saw music played inside the Biltmore? One person. That's interesting, but it's been a while.
What did they see?
What did you see?
Tommy Dorsey, Sinatra.
I wish it was somebody big. It was a local band. 25-cent dance kind of thing.
So before we dive into the music, I want to give a background on the Biltmore, kind of move through that quickly, and then I have about 20, 30-second music clips that show the variety of genres of music that were played there, and then we'll talk about the demise of the Biltmore. So it started out as the Surf and Sand Club. In January 23 as an athletic club. It had 210 feet of beach frontage between 14th and 15th. So if you know where Noble Park is, that's where it stood. 30 male aristocrats of Hermosa, Redondo, Manhattan Beach were the organizers, and Ralph Madison, who was the president of the First National Bank of Hermosa, led the effort. And it was designed by Myron Hunt and H.C. Chambers. They also did the Ambassador Hotel, if you've ever heard of that, the Coconut Grove, which was raised also to be a school. In the bottom left is the Malaga Cove Library, which still stands, beautiful building. And on the bottom right is the Rose Bowl. So they were prominent architects that were hired to do the design. In June 25 had a grand opening. It was the tallest building in the South Bay. And I'm going to stretch your memories and tell me if it wasn't the tallest building when it was raised in '69. Because I think it may have held that distinction through its whole life as being the tallest building in the South Bay. But it opened with a dinner dance. And this is what the neighborhood would have looked like back in the day when the Biltmore was standing. Pretty sparsely populated. I don't know the exact date of this picture, but it's sparse as it is. The first two floors, you had a ground floor. It was built on 250 concrete piles that were put into the ground with an average depth of 26 feet. Steel and concrete construction. There was a lobby, a swimming pool, women's locker room, barber and hairdresser, and then there was a mezzanine level that had men's locker rooms and a billiard room. This is the best sketch that I have of the layout. The top is the top right is the pool with the women's locker rooms, and the bottom is the mezzanine level, and that's a picture of what the pool looked like. It was called a saltwater plunge. The second floor was a dining and living room, also called a solarium, and had a library. It was 198 feet long. It extended across the entire front of the building, faced the ocean, hardwood floor for banquets and dancing, and it could accommodate 2,500 guests on that floor, so that's a pretty big area. But there's some pictures of the layout there. That's the dining room on the left, the lobby area or the solarium kind of in the middle, and then tucked in the back right corner was a library and lounge room. Here's another picture of I guess I'd be looking north inside the ballroom with the windows on the west side. And then it had 4 bedroom floors with bathrooms above, and there was 31 rooms on each floor with modest furnishings. This is the only picture I've been able to find, or we've been able to find, of what the furnishings looked like. And the rooms, I think, were fairly small. Now we're getting into some music. From January 26 to 29, I found that there's a band called El Ritum. There's a Shrine Club orchestra band made up from local South Bay Shrine Club members. And their acronym was for all the cities within the South Bay. So we'll hear. This would have been not necessarily played there, but typical of being played there. It was hard to find any songs or musicians from the early days that actually played there. Here's a picture that we found of the December 1926 wedding anniversary party. So very well-dressed members in the ballroom area, the dining room area. And here's a 1927 picture of the first anniversary of the Surf and Sand Club. And in case you're wondering, it would have cost you $7,000 to become a member in today's dollars, and $700 a year adjusted for annual dues. And as typical and not unique at that time, it was it had racial covenants. It was open to any white person of Christian ancestry to at least 21 years of age. If you didn't fit that category, you wouldn't become a member. In 1929, September, it merged with the Los Angeles Athletic Club. So the members of the Surf and Sand would now have reciprocal agreements to go use the other athletic clubs throughout Los Angeles for accommodations and recreation. Because at that time, there weren't a lot of communities built up yet in LA. You know, downtown LA had a community, but there was a lot of remote areas. So these clubs gave an opportunity for people to travel around Los Angeles and have a place to stay. And then 1 month later, this is what happened to the country and the world. We had a stock market crash that continued for several years, and the Depression went on. So I think things kind of, from what I can tell, things weren't real lively or active at the Surf and Sand during this time. But in August of '32, we hosted an Olympics dinner dance. with over 200 athletes, officials, and guests were entertained. India, Norway, and Guatemala representatives were there. And to noted, the LA Athletic Club athletes earned a high number of medals during the 32 Olympics. Also, historical perspective is the Prohibition ended in 1933. So all this time, the first 10 years of the Surf Zam, I guess there was no alcohol. Right? You know, I've had that hard to believe, And then in May of 1937, there was a coast-to-coast radio broadcast. The Junior Chamber of Commerce had an awards and entertainment banquet. 700 people attended. It was the most elaborate program ever in the South Bay in 1937. The California governor came down to give an award to Walt Disney, but he couldn't make it, so the award was given to Donald Duck. And Laurel and Hardy attended, and Amelia Earhart was on the guest list. This was 1 month before she disappeared over the Pacific Ocean. So one of her last big celebrations. And then in September of 37, the Surf and Sand Club ceased operations. They wanted to have private frontage for their members. So you can see the way it was built right on the beach there. They were having to share the beach with the riffraff. And they wanted to have their own exclusive beach frontage. It went back and forth. And finally, they couldn't get the Hermosa Beach approval, so they shuttered the club in September 37. And then in March of 1938, a guy named William Shurich, who had opened a hotel in Manhattan Beach in May of 37, called the Marine Hotel in Little Bavaria, he signed a 10-year lease with the LA Athletic Club to open a hotel. And that's when it became known as the Hermosa Biltmore. But he abandoned his ambitions and the hotel never opened by him. So in January of 39, the U.S. Treasury Department, here we are in the midst of the Depression, people are looking for work, for jobs, or some way to get ahead. The LA Athletic Club leased the property to the U.S. Treasury Department, and the federally funded National Youth Administration moved in. And they were going to have up to 500 16 to 25-year-old students in need to be domiciled. And they had plans for busing these students to Macy School, which is 24 miles away in the backside of Union Station. I don't know who was thinking about this. And the locals didn't like the idea. They thought it would be derogatory to their beach resort, and it would lower property values and keep visitors away from the Strand. And in July of 39, the project was abandoned. But this is what it looked like when the students moved in and cleaned the place up. That bottom center picture is them cleaning the pool. Up above is like the kitchen areas. So they look like good kids, but they didn't stay long. And then finally in May of 1940, a hotel opened. And it's the first time it's actually operated as a hotel. It's welcomed by the community, but it's only a summer season. They closed in October. And then in February of 41, they reopened the hotel. And then later that year, this happened. So Pearl Harbor hit in December of 41. And prior to Pearl Harbor, just by a couple months, for some reason, the South Bay Club of Republican Women started an Army and Navy hospital club. So during the war, this was a leisure space for military servicemen and their families. The entertainment at that time would have been magazine, books, radio, games, puzzles, music, and snacks and food were donated. And because we had so many aircraft workers in the area building airplanes over in El Segundo, they had swing shift dances. And soldiers were, asked to come and enjoy their furloughs at the club. So it was, I guess, fairly active during the war years, but I didn't really find any music per se that was being played there. Here's a couple pictures of what it looked like looking down. And then in May of 45, the Nazis surrendered, and the LA Athletic Club, a couple days later, sold the Biltmore to an Eastern syndicate. And then they advertised to have this hotel reopened. And And in June of 45, they opened a new room in the hotel called the Egyptian Room. And the first person I could find that, well, the person who opened the Egyptian Room was Jake Porter, King Jake Porter, and his orchestra. He was a jazz trumpeter. He had served in the U.S. military and later in life became a record producer. So this was the sounds of Jake Porter. And then in August of 45, the War in the Pacific ended. And in September, we had the Johnny Alston Orchestra played with a lady, a vocalist, Jean DeMetz. And they had a sound they called jump blues. Jump blues. This is entertaining. Jan Savick with his orchestra came to the Biltmore, and his Top Hatters Orchestra was playing on the radio. They had a sound that they called shuffle rhythm. But enjoy this.
From first violinist in a symphony orchestra, Jan Savick rides to even greater heights on the bandwagon of popularity. Professional children, or Hermosa Beach Museum does not recommend your children do that at home. The lawyer said to throw that in. And then Meadluck Lewis came in November of 47. At an early age, he gave up the violin to play piano, and he had Honky Tonk Train Blues that was played by many musicians, was one of his favorite songs, or famous songs, but he inspired a decade-long boogie-woogie craze. that I'm topping that, right, I think. Let's see. Okay, then this is a famous trombonist. Have you guys heard of him? Tommy Peterson? Okay. Known for his work in jazz, big band, and classical. He was a prolific studio musician. And here he is playing Flight of the Bumblebee. December 47, Billy Banks came and played, famous for jazz and big band swing. She was also known as a female impersonator known as Billy Rose. And why am I not getting... Huh.
There you go.
Was that, it's on that screen? That's right, I can't see it on mine. What do we do? Sorry about this. We're live on the internet, so. Okay.
It don't mean a thing if it ain't got the swing. It don't mean a thing, all you gotta do is sing. It makes no difference if
Here's the Woody Herman. You guys play Woody Herman tonight? He was known as a clarinetist. He was a saxophonist, singer, and big band leader. He led a group of musicians called the Thundering Herd, and he came to prominence in the late 30s and was active until his death. K-Star seems like a name I heard when I was a kid, but I didn't know anything. She played here in December of 47. Where's this one? Sorry.
All right.
Just go back.
One thing in a song and it's a good day. Oh, moving along, yes, it's a good day. How can anything go wrong? It's a good day from morning till night.
You remember him from the Lucy Show? Ricky Ricardo. He was also the band leader on Bob Hope's radio show. But I think this is where they got the term hot laughing lover. Here's the other one, Les Brown, and his band of renown in January '48. Jack Fina was a band leader, songwriter, and pianist, and he had a sound he called Bumble Boogie. This is one of my favorites. She's very sultry and sexy. She was the queen of American pop music. She recorded over 1,100 masters and co-wrote over 270 songs.
Sue Disney.
December of '48, Jimmy Witherspoon came in with his Gene Gilbo Orchestra to play Jump Blues. It's an up-tempo style of blues, jazz, and boogie-woogie. So I found these few slides of the exterior of the Baltimore. And to me, looking at them a little close, it looks like it was getting a little unkept. Yeah. In May 1951, there was a stag and striptease party raid. 750 gamblers fled. 5 people got arrested. This was really interesting that I found recently. That it was back in the Cold War, you had civilians that got on top of buildings and high places and looked for enemy aircraft approaching the country. So there was thousands of these civilian observation posts, and they were managed by volunteers. And in '55, the Biltmore was chosen as an observation post, and it was considered one of the most critical because it was the highest observation post in this area. But in 1958, radar improved, and they didn't need to use the civilians anymore. But this is what it would have been like to be a civilian volunteer up on top of the Biltmore, looking for atomic-equipped enemy aircraft. And the duck and cover warnings would have been going off. Rolf Eriksson was a Swedish jazz trumpeter and flugelhorn player in December of '53. And then in November of '55, we had Manny Lopez, king of cha-cha-cha, who had been playing in Vegas and Cuba. He came here with his cha-cha-cha dancers.
Lo mismo si canta a punto de nacer, mi pensamiento llega muy dentro de mí, pero yo escogeré el que más sabe de ti, porque tú eres mi vida. Un cha-cha-cha, un cantor, un guaguancó, un buen sol, será un bolero, lo que sea me importa, mi música es para ti. Un cha-cha-cha.
Something you don't see very often nowadays. We're fortunate to have these posters in our archives. I don't know how we got them or where they came from, but this was the summer, or beginning in the summer of '56. These are all black artists who played in the ballroom, and a lot of the artists, I couldn't find anything in digitized newspapers, but a lot of them did record, so they just weren't newsworthy. But I did find this group here that played on August 4th,
There was one newspaper article I found called the Huggy Boy Hit Parade, and it was led by Joe Houston. It's a doo-wop set. And these are the 16s. And we have the youngsters.
You shattered my dream. You broke it apart when you told me you loved somebody good. I'll never forget when you told me the news. It hurt deep inside. And oh, how I cried.
That would have been a good show, you know. There's another group there that couldn't find anything sugar and spice. Now, Russ Morgan was a big band leader in the 30s and 40s, and he had this signature style called In the Morgan Manner. And from December 58 through 59, he was kind of the house band with his son Jack. But this is music in the Morgan Manner.
You are listening to the Radio King song of Russ Morgan and his orchestra, playing music in the Morgan manner.
People dressed up a little different, but okay, now we're getting into the rock scene. In November of '62, there was the Journeymen and Beach Boys came to play. If you can see on the ad here, they're advertising winter rates to stay at the Biltmore single and double rooms, apartments. So I really don't know, you know, through all these years, how active it was as a hotel or more of a residential place for people to stay. But anyway, the Journeymen came here. They were a 1961 folk music trio from Greenwich Village who had been playing there at the same time as Bob Dylan. And later on, John Phillips of the Journeymen, he formed the Mamas and the Papas. But this would have been the music the Journeymen played. Folk music. And then, along with that, was the Beach Boys. The Biltmore was just a short drive from their Hawthorne home.
Yeah.
And Surfing Safari was released, just recently released, that's just a typo. But, let's see if I get it connected here.
surfboard laying on the stage with them. We have a replica of that board, the same one that's on the album cover. There's a replica of that surfing safari board in the boardroom back there.
I was really happy.
And this was the era of the surf music. And a lot of bands started up here in the South Bay and down in Orange County. This was a group called the Fireballs that played here. Yeah, it's all that Link Ray, all that early surfing music. Then this is the group called the Searchers. They were a local Manhattan beach band that played in December of '62. There's a little bit of a story here about the Searchers. They were, Rick and Jim Manzarek lived and practiced in Manhattan Beach with the Searchers. And then in '64, their brother Ray moved to Manhattan Beach, and they became known as Rick and the Ravens. And then Ray, who had just moved in and joined the band, he invited Jim Morrison to join Rick and the Ravens. And then they recorded 6 what would become Doors songs. And Rick and Jim Manzarek, the original Searchers, the brothers of Ray, they left before the Doors classic lineup was formed with Ronnie Krieger because they thought Jim was weird and they were going nowhere fast. But this is what the Searchers would have sounded like in '62.
Let's move! Let's move! Rampage!
This was an advertisement for a group called the Vibrants, and the show at the Biltmore Ballroom was, the music was played by the Vibrants, and there were two surf movies that were played that same night, Surf Mania and Standing Room Only. So that was another thing that kind of started off in the late 50s and early 60s, were these surf movies, and they played it inside the ballroom. Then this happened. A Cup of Cold Water Ministry. How many have heard of this? Just one person in the room. Okay, so Reverend Wahlberg took possession of the property, and he planned to make the hotel his evangelical ministry's global center, and he hosted gospel singers. And one of the regulars that came was a woman named Ethel Waters, who was began her career in the 20s. She performed jazz, swing, pop on Broadway concerts. She was called the mother of us all by many of her contemporaries because she broke the entertainment color barrier, and at one time she was the highest paid woman in show business. But in 1957 she met Billy Graham and rededicated her life to Jesus.
Why should my heart be lonely, away from heaven and home, when Jesus is my portion? Tonight.
Okay. Then along with the gospel singers who were playing there,
Reverend started Stubbs Pub from 64 to 65 as a religious youth center for kids to come in and hang out. And they have hootenannies at Stubbs Pub. And this is one of the, kind of their band that would play there.
This is Stubbs speaking. Now, the experience of being saved is something that everybody tries to avoid. But if you're out in the water and you get real tired, or a surfboard comes and hits you on the head or something like that, then you are in need of being saved. Well, now we're going to go back to a little bit of music by the Lonely One.
Interesting.
This is Stubbs speaking.
So in '66, the Hermosa Biltmore closed. The Club of Coldwater was indicted on 15 charges of violating California security laws. The donors were promised lifetime residency. About $500,000 was donated or invested by people. In '67, he was convicted of violating securities laws. Hotel rehabilitation plan stopped, and the IRS auctioned the property in the city of Hermosa Beach bought it. This is like one of the last pictures of the Hermosa standing with what was later called a church in front. That white building was a church there, and that church eventually became like a punk rock hangout before it was torn down. And then in '68, there was a fire. It was being occupied by transients, squatters, and deviants. The hotel was condemned and razed in '69. And again, the question, I think this might have been still the tallest building in the South Bay. I looked at the power plant, but it wasn't as tall. So I don't know if anything more was taller than the South Bay when it was raised. But this is '69 before demolition. And here it is being demolished. And then it was a vacant lot from 1969 to 1995. I don't know how many remember that just sat there. Hermosa couldn't agree on what to do with the vacant land. There were 14 referendums on plans for the parcel. And then finally in 1995, Joe and Betty Noble of Hermosa donated $90,000 to fulfill Proposition D, and that's why we call it Noble Park. If you know it. So that's what it looked like vacant from '69 to '95. And then there's Noble Park as it became, as it is now in '95. And then most recently, we did the mural project in commemoration of the Biltmore. And now if there's any questions. I didn't see any coordination between, but there was the lighthouse, and there were several other clubs in the Hermosa area, and I'm sure if we probably dug deeper, there would probably be some of the same artists that might have been playing at the lighthouse that played at the Biltmore. I don't know. That's another deep dive into newspaper articles to see who all played at the lighthouse. There's going to be way more artists than what we could find at the Biltmore. Yeah.
Mark, that was amazing as usual. Thank you so much. I depend on your research. Is it apocryphal about Tommy Dorsey, Sinatra, ever playing at the ballroom at the Biltmore?
You want to answer that, Adam?
I saw at least one reference to Sinatra playing the Biltmore in 1950, but not enough to absolutely confirm it as a fact.
Thank you, Adam. Yeah. Well, that's what we count on here at the museum. We want to make sure we're
But
reliable.
apparently one of them said it was at a point where Sinatra was at a low in his career, so it could have potentially gone, under the radar, so to speak. Who knows?
Deeper, but I think Mark probably would have found it, Mark, because you're so good. Thank you so much.
I use
newspapers.com. It's digital newspapers. So basically, I found as many artists as I could, doing a search on the Biltmore and musicians. More questions, Adam?
I just want to make one comment that's kind of interesting. So at the time the Beach Boys played there, 62, that was right after they got signed by Capitol Records. And in an interview with Mike Love of the Beach Boys, he said he and Dennis Wilson were living at 1727 Hermosa Avenue at that same time. So it was shorter than Hawthorne. It was a short walk around the corner. And the same building is still there, by the way, at 1727.
And some further research after Adam piqued my curiosity. Apparently for a short time, Dennis Wilson lived above the green store in those green buildings there. So folks, what I always say when folks come into our museum, not Huntington Beach, not Santa Cruz, Hermosa Beach is Surf City.
Thank you, Nancy. Yes.
I have a question. In the first slides you had, there were a lot of people in the ballroom, but there wasn't a big population in Hermosa. Did they come from other parts of,
Well,
LA or?
Yeah, the Hermosa Beach became incorporated in 1907, but the early, most of those early people who were probably in that picture, I'm guessing came from downtown LA to their beach houses. A lot of the bungalows that were built in Hermosa were vacation cottages. If they could come on the Red Line, or in the early times, then this roads got developed in the 20s. They could venture off in their cars and come down here. But I have a feeling, a fair amount of those people, if not most of them, were out of towners that just came down and came for events or stayed for vacations, small vacations, weekends. That type
You
of
said the key word, Mark. Before you leave, folks, if you haven't looked at this picture before that's right here, and you see all the people on the beach there in front of the Biltmore, this is like the late 20s. They came down here on the red car. There's just no question about it. And in this other case over here, we show the map of how many communities that red car served. The roads were small. There were 2-lane until the 405 in the mid-60s. Rick, you could probably talk about that because you lived here at that time. I would say, you can tell me if it's not true. I think most of these folks came down here via the red car.
Until 1955, yeah.
Yeah,
And
okay.
in the early days, one of the reasons it was so densely populated is because even some of the more affluent families didn't have air conditioning. And they would come from the Pasadena and the Los Angeles area.
Yeah. But be sure to check out this picture, and as we got into the surf era, look at the bottom shelf of this case over here in our music corner and see how many surf bands. You're going to be amazed when you see how many surf bands perform not only at the Biltmore, but right here at the community theater. For like 75 cents a concert, something like that, Rick?
That was big money, dude.
Yeah, big money.
And you're almost standing on the cornerstone for the Biltmore.
That's right here.
Our very first female mayor, Pat Gazen, actually pulled that out of the rubble and saved it. And the time capsule that's over there somewhere was inside of it. That's a whole nother happy hour of history. Right?
Speaking of pulling things out of the rubble, there's nobody's pulled more things out of the rubble than Rick. That we have here on the
Okay, any other questions? I know we've had you here a long time tonight, but I hope you enjoyed it. Yes. And I'm gonna, the museum will post this presentation with like a Google Doc, so you'll be able to go through and hit some of those clips and watch them longer and explore more than I could show tonight.
Thank you, Mark.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.